The eerie silence is interrupted by splashes of water and the barking of an unfamiliar dog. We see how he is desperately trying to escape and stay on the surface of a huge tank of water. The dog is fighting for life until his strength runs out, after which he is pulled to the bottom, but he was quickly pulled out, brought to life and recorded for repeated experience. From conversations, we hear that the indicator is 2 hours, 20 minutes and 53 seconds, which is 5 minutes more than on Wednesday, and 12 seconds more than the previous indicator. People wonder what will happen when the result goes beyond the physical possibility. A dog in a container named Ralph is one of the main characters of this cartoon. He is one of the many animals being experimented on in this laboratory. Each of the animals here has its own destiny. Someone is stuffed with various chemicals and looks at how the animal's body will react to it. Someone is simply deprived of organs. According to the fantasies of scientists, there are no boundaries in this. Ralph has the same thing all the time. He is being tested to see how much he will fight for his life. However, the conditions of the experiment are changing, as we have seen this time. Scientists have recorded indications of how long the dog will fight for life in the form of a person nearby and counting on salvation. Therefore, this time he lasted longer than usual, because he believed that a person would help and would not let him drown. Ralph wakes up and sees another dog next to him, a small terrier named Smith. He looks more intelligent and says that the door is no longer an obstacle for them, and the net below looks much weaker. Apparently, the experiments that are being conducted on Smith are related to the study of the brain, since we see a bandage on his head. Smith tells Ralph that it's time to get out of here, but Ralph doubts. He says that at least they feed here, and he doesn't remember any other life, and he calls people white coats. Having completely lost confidence in people, he does not know what awaits them outside the walls of laboratories, and the unknown is terrible for him. Smith, unlike Ralph, was a pet. Previously, he had a kind owner, whom he loved very much. At some point Smith jumped out of the yard to catch up with his beloved owner and go with him, but starting to run across the road, he did not notice the car rushing at breakneck speed. At that moment the man saw that his beloved dog jumped out onto the road and tried to save his dog, but at the same time he flew under the wheels. It's all that terrier, it's his fault, the dog killed him. Some people thought the dog was to blame for the man's death, and the dog was given to a shelter. Smith never forgets about his late master, constantly remembers how good they were together. He believes, unlike Ralph, that people are good and they will definitely find such friends. In the end, Ralph agrees, and together they go to wander around the laboratory in search of a way out. Here they see what was previously hidden from their eyes, a huge number of animals on which experiments are carried out. Horror overcomes them even more. A little later, they still manage to get out through the cremation furnace. Then they go to explore the nearest area and stumble upon the city, where they decide to go to the store. Smith says that people usually store meat, cookies and other products there. However, they get scared when they accidentally see a salesman with a knife in his hand, mistaking him for a scientist in a white coat. Continuing to explore the area, something strange happens to Smith. Apparently the consequences of experiments on his brain. He completely loses his sight and almost gets run over by a car. The driver, thinking that the dog has been hurt, decides to save her, but Ralph attacks him with a strong bark because he does not believe that people are kind. Wandering around the neighborhood, our two heroes stumble upon farm dogs who walk sheep very competently, and then drive them into a pen. Smith tells Ralph that he said that people are good, and begins to remember how the owner constantly threw a stick. People like it when we run after them, and these dogs have sheep instead of sticks. And for their excellent work, the owner loves them and feeds them. They decided they could, too, and as a result they start chasing sheep, but everything goes upside down. The sheep eventually get scared and run away, and the pen breaks down. Two farm dogs tell them to get out of here to their farm. They have been collecting sheep from the slope for a very long time, and now all the work is for nothing, and the sheep are scared to death. Smith says they just wanted to help, that they don't have a host. They expected the farmer to accept them, To which the other dogs replied that their owner would stuff them with lead. That's what would happen to them if they did not leave these lands. In the end, Ralph and Smith just leave. When hunger completely overcomes our heroes, Ralph decides to become wild dogs like their ancestors were, survive in the wild on their own, hunt and not rely on food from people. A little later, they get acquainted with a fox named Toth and conclude a deal with him that is beneficial for both Toth and our heroes. He will teach them how to get food, they will catch sheep and other animals for him, and he will share food with them. Ralph initially treats him with distrust and says that the fox is a deceiver and a thief, but under pressure from his friend, they accept the conditions. Over the next few weeks, dogs with a fox successfully get their own food, steal sheep, break into local chicken coops, but after a while local farmers don't like it anymore. One of them even calls the laboratory and asks if any animals are missing from them. However, the operator says that he cannot answer this question and will call him back later, hinting that there is no information for the farmer. This situation does not suit the farmers at all and they undertake to take it under their control, armed with guns for shooting wild animals. As a result, people find a place where they live, and a local gang led by a fox has to leave their favorite place. A little later they find an abandoned barn in which they decide to spend the night. At night, Smith can't sleep, and he goes exploring, but gets lost in search of a way back, and also gets into the binoculars of one of the hunters. But this farmer, unlike his other colleagues, turned out to be kind. He liked the dog and he decides to save him. The hunter calls the dog to him, and Smith inadvertently accidentally shoots in the face of a man who most likely wanted to give him food and, most importantly, a house, to become his real master or, as Smith always dreamed, his real friend. Now the situation is getting worse. Smith has already blamed himself for the death of his former owner, and now this. Plus, the police are added to the search for wild animals. There are already rumors among people in all local towns that rabid mutated dogs are walking around at night. Local media start asking questions of the research laboratory, after which it turns out that the laboratory previously conducted experiments with bubonic plague. People are starting to panic and believe that dogs have bubonic plague. Now all people, including farmers and the police, want to catch dogs because they are even afraid to let children out on the street. Ralph and Smith are now in an even more difficult situation, after they quarreled with Todd because he ate all the eggs and didn't even share with them. Ralph says he knew the crook was constantly cheating them, eating himself and treating them like beggars. As a result, the gang breaks up and the dogs stay together as before. After a while, we realize that Ralph and Smith aren't such good hunters, and Todd didn't really teach them anything. Wandering around a small town, they stumble upon the inhabitants of one house. The evil owner wanted to kill the dogs, but the hostess said, no. There was a message on TV about dogs that escaped from Lowson Park, even the plague was mentioned. Next, we see a prolonged starvation of two dogs, so long that the dogs became emaciated and even their ribs became visible. After a while, they meet one of the very farm dogs they met at the beginning of their difficult journey. Smith asks why the sheep disappeared, to which he replies that when snow falls, they are lowered into the valley. At this moment, the farmer sees how the dog has found the supposedly rabid dogs, and calls him over. A little later, he easily tracks them down and decides to shoot them, but at that moment Todd appears, who interferes with him, causing the farmer to fall off the slope and die. Once again, the dogs were lucky, but the local administration finds the body of a farmer bitten by dogs, after which it attracts the military to shoot the animals and introduces a state of emergency in the district. Todd, although he was a fraud, but offers his help as a true friend. He says that he will distract the military and attract attention to himself, which will allow Ralph and Smith to buy some time so that they can safely leave. At first, Todd is just wounded, but then trained military shepherds are released on him, who drive Todd right into the trap. Unfortunately, Todd dies after giving his life for his friends. Of course, dogs cannot hide for a long time, as all ordinary people, farmers, police and military are looking for them. As a result, they find themselves on a local beach. Smith says that he sees a small island in the distance, and this can be a salvation for them. Ralph says he doesn't see an island there, but he believes his friend and throws himself into the water, although he is very afraid of it. Sailing further and further away, the fog envelops the dogs. The military do not see them, just as they do not see the islands. Smith begins to doubt whether he saw anything at all or if it was again hallucinations that we saw earlier and which most likely occurred due to experiments on his brain. Smith completely loses his strength and can no longer swim. He says it's time to give up, but Ralph says he sees an island that inspires hope, after which the two best friends slowly float away into the fog. The last scene is the same as the first. We see in it Ralph, who gives hope to his best friend, hope that there is an island somewhere far away. Ralph understands everything perfectly, because the experiment at the beginning of the cartoon showed that if a dog has hope for salvation, it can really stay in the water much longer. I never thought that at my age I would be touched by a cartoon released in 1977. Obviously, in those years the director realized that breaking established patterns corresponding to interesting and absolutely adult stories framed by cartoon characters would set his paintings apart from the rest. In front of me, as well as in front of the viewer, there is a pleasant animation of talking animals that mainly strive to become characters in children's films or cartoons, but here they are endowed with absolutely shocking psychotrauma, problems, injustice of the world and cruelty. It is this dissonance that completely forces you to watch the cartoon to the very end. Throughout the whole picture, I, an adult viewer, empathized with dogs like a little boy, not only from the position of the pet owner, but also from the human side, perceiving the characters as people with such problems, feelings and characters.